Do I travel with 2 passports? My life as a dual citizen. Hello everybody, Brenda with Life with the Jacksons. Today we're going to dive into a question I get asked a lot. What is it like to have 2 passports, my Canadian and my American passports? When do you use them and why? Most of my life I've been living in Canada and recently have moved into the US. And today we're going to cover what it's like and some tips along the way of what happens when I travel, what passport do I use, and the pros and cons to it. So buckle up, let's dive into this. Let me give you a little background history. So my parents are Canadian. I was born in the US, which back in the 70s made you automatically an American citizen. I lived in Canada most of my life, so all my day-to-day living was primarily about Canadian, so it was quite simple. But now that I've moved over and now residing in the US, now it's a little bit more technical. Let's talk about passport basics. So when you're traveling, you use the passport where you're a citizen of. So if I was traveling to Canada, I use my Canadian passport. If I was traveling throughout the US, I'd use my US passport. Now, if I'm traveling to any other country, the norm would be use your passport where you're residing in, but you do really have options to either use your Canadian or your American passport. Being the only one in my family that was American citizen, I really didn't have a lot of direction and wasn't sure on when I was supposed to use my American passport, when I was supposed to use my Canadian passport. And it was really confusing. I'll tell you a little story that when I was living in Canada, I was traveling to the US and I thought, well, if I'm just traveling to the US, I read all you do is use your US passport. So I only brought 1 passport with me. No problem going to the US, but coming back, all I had was my US passport to show the Canadian immigration. Well, they didn't like it. It wasn't clear to them what country I belonged to. So the US, they only, if you were born in the US, you are a US citizen. They don't consider dual citizenship. In Canada, they know that you have the dual citizenship. But going back, I needed to show proof that I was Canadian. I didn't have my Canadian passport. Good thing I had my driver's license, my Canadian driver's license, to show that I was indeed a Canadian living in Canada. But again, I was a little bit afraid, a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure on what to do. Now, if I'm traveling to any other parts of the world, I will look at both passports to see what the restrictions are and decide at that point in time, which leads me into the pros and cons of having dual passports, dual citizenship. So let's go on to the pros. So a lot of countries have visa restrictions. So sometimes the Canadian passport might be beneficial where I won't need to have a visa to enter that country. So in that case, I'd use the Canadian passport. So I look at visa-free accessibility. The second one is it's easier to travel between Canada and the US. I can use either or passport. So an ease of traveling. And the last one, it's the big one, is the ability to live, work, and own property in both countries, both Canada and the US. Let's talk about the cons. This one drives me nuts. When I was living in Canada, it drove me nuts because I lived and worked in Canada. I still had to file a tax return as American citizen. There's a tax treaty, so I didn't have to pay any income taxes, additional income taxes, but I still had to file the paperwork. Now living in the US, I still have to file a tax return in the US and Canada. So you can go a little bit more in depth into it, but that's not what the purpose of this video is. But again, it's a pain in the butt. You may also have to declare your status as a non-resident in Canada. Again, this is another topic, but that's a con. Now it does get a little bit tricky if you are traveling and use the wrong passport as traveling. Tip: bring both passports. Ease of traveling, less worries, no stress. So I hope this video was helpful. I'd love to hear your stories or any suggestions of having dual citizenship and 2 passports or even more, and shed some light in the comments area. Let this life be our best life. I look forward to connecting to you. Safe travels. Bye-bye.